I spend a good deal of time thinking. I think about you, our listeners. I think about the message that might make an impact in your relationships. And recently I had someone say to me, wow, in that last episode you guys did on empathy, I think it was, it felt like you were really, really just talking directly to me.
I mean, have you ever had that happen to you where you find yourself just nodding along with a podcast host, feeling like they're speaking directly to you? Yeah, I do that as well. And when I listen to other shows, sometimes it's like the host is just like tapped into my mind and we having these very same shared experiences and common struggles. And guess what? Like it's true. Many of us are dealing with similar struggles. More than ever, I realize that our problems really aren't that unique at all.
No, they're not. And that lets us know that we're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are not alone. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's reminding you that whatever challenges you're facing, others are right there with you. And we are right there with
Oh,
you.
we've been there with you.
So let's talk about learning new things.
Oh, I hate new things.
No.
I do. It's so hard.
I know many of you listen in each week, and some of you take notes, even listening to each episode 2 or 3 times, taking notes. And then the next week, Robert and I move on to a new topic while you're still trying to figure out how to master the last topic that we talked about.
Yeah, and learning is so frustrating. It's a journey of trying to master this new skill and then apply knowledge. And if we think about it, when you started as a baby, you didn't remember this, but you never would have learned how to walk had you not fallen down,
Yeah.
taken some information from that falling down, gotten up and tried again. And so every time we try to apply or learn a new skill, we feel like we're just sort of stumbling and falling in the dark. And I'm sure that, if you've watched a baby learn to walk, you realize they get frustrated, they sit down and they cry because they're not there. But, they never know if they're going to get it right, but in time they will. So as it relates to our relationships, as we learn these new skills that we talk about and we start to apply them, it can feel like we're not making progress fast enough.
It can.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Learning isn't a straight line. It's really more like a roller coaster with ups and downs. And it actually has 4 distinct stages. And each of these 4 stages comes with their fair share of emotional ups and downs as well. So
Yeah.
think about it. Ever felt like giving up because you're not seeing progress as quickly as you'd hoped? Or maybe you've questioned if your struggles are somehow just bigger and just harder than everyone else's. Spoiler alert, they're not.
They're not.
They're
Yeah.
not.
And it's just that learning takes time. It's a process. There's really no shortcuts. There's no easy way out. There's no cheat code.
Mm-mm.
But if you understand the 4 stages that we're going to talk about today and the specific emotions and challenges that come with each stage, then it will make your journey a little less rocky.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're going to be unpacking those stages of learning. We're going to be shedding light on this emotional roller coaster of learning and reassuring you that it's okay to take your time. Because guess what? If you haven't mastered your marriage yet, it's okay. You are normal and you're not alone.
So buckle up because we're about to delve into the world of learning. Welcome to the ride. Welcome back to another episode. If this is your first time joining the show, welcome. And we thank you so much for being here. Make sure that while you're here, you hit that subscribe button because we drop a new episode every Wednesday and we wouldn't want you to miss one.
No, we wouldn't. And, I've been thinking all week about what an important episode this is. The more I think we can all recognize that we go through the same emotions and the same challenges as we're learning new things, the better we can handle the emotional ups and downs and move ourselves through each of these stages of learning more successfully.
So today we want to introduce you to the concept called the competency ladder. It's also sometimes called the competency matrix or the 4 levels of learning. And this model was developed by Noel Birch, who was an employee at Gordon Training International way back in the 1970s.
So imagine for a moment, if you will, that there is a staircase of steps rising upward right in front of you. We're going to use this visual throughout the episode. And right now you are standing on top of this first step. And it's the learning staircase. Okay. So you're on the bottom step. And this step has a name, which we're going to tell you what that is in just a moment.
Noel Birch's theory references 2 factors that influence how we learn any new skill, these two factors are competence and consciousness. You can Google the conscious competence ladder and see the little matrix that shows the relationship between competence and consciousness as it pertains to specific skill sets and specific learning.
Yeah. Say that 10 times
Yeah.
fast.
So before we move forward, we should define those two words. So competence means being capable, skilled, qualified in any subject, and we can either be competent or we can be incompetent in that skill.
Those two words are important to remember, competent or incompetent.
Yep.
Okay. The second factor that she talks about is consciousness. And conscious just means having an awareness of something. If we're conscious of it, then we are aware of it. If we are unconscious, that means we're not aware of it or we're ignorant, but ignorant in the sense of unaware.
So now let's go back to those steps that you're standing on in front of you, and let's put these two words together. And as you stand on the first step of learning staircase, I want you to look down and see the name on that step. And that first step is called unconscious incompetence.
Say that slowly.
Conscious.
Unconscious incompetence,
Yep.
which means you are unskilled, right? You're not competent. And you're also unaware that you're unskilled at the same time. So, in other words, at this stage, you don't know what you don't know.
We all been there, that's for sure.
You don't know that you don't have this skill. You don't even know yet that you need to learn this skill. You're just blissfully and ignorantly, just happily unaware.
I love being blissfully unaware at times.
Sometimes it is nice.
Yeah. So our youngest son, we talk a lot about him. He just got his learner's permit for driving, so he's learning how to drive. And the other day, I said to him, I said, "Hey, let's we're doing pretty good. Let's try out the cruise control." And in that moment, he didn't even know that the cruise control existed. Meaning, he was unconscious for that, right? He didn't know that something existed or that he even needed to learn how to use it. So he was also incompetent because he didn't know which buttons to press or how to turn it on or off of the cruise control.
So he was unconscious and incompetent.
Yep.
Unconscious incompetence. So that's level one. And I think as we think back right through our relationship, Robert and I's relationship, and all the things that we have shared with you here for over a year on this podcast, right? And we've talked about lots of different skills here. At one point, we were ignorant and unaware of all of these things too. We didn't know what, for example, a gentle startup was. We had never heard of nonviolent communication. I didn't know that contempt was the number one predictor for divorce. And actually, I don't even think I knew what the word contempt meant. I think I actually had to look that up and look up the definition. And I certainly didn't realize how often I was doing it.
We were blissfully unaware.
Blissfully unaware.
But maybe not so blissfully.
Sometimes not so blissfully.
Yeah, mostly just
in
unaware.
That case.
Yeah. So this is the first step on the learning staircase, which is unconscious incompetence. We don't know yet what we don't know, and we certainly don't have any competence to be sort of pulling off this skill. And we've all been there. We've all stood on this step. And I bet you can think of 100 things in your life where you're going along blissfully unaware that you needed to learn something. And then all of a sudden you realize oh man, I didn't even know that I needed to know that piece of information.
Totally.
Where's that been my whole life?
Exactly. So how do we move off of this step? How do we move to this second level? Well, you have to first get really clear about why you actually need to learn this thing. So now you've become aware here, but do I really need to learn it? Why do I need to learn it?
Right.
So you need to understand what this new skill is going to do for you.
Yeah. And you might also need to do an evaluation of your strengths and weaknesses and some sort of assessment of your skills needed to learn and accomplish this skill.
Right.
And with our couples coaching, we do a thing called a relationship checkup with couples that gives them a report on their strengths and weaknesses. And you could also ask other people in your life for their input to help you identify the weaknesses that you may not have seen or may have missed.
Yeah, that's so smart because those are our blind spots that we don't even realize that we have. And I have a story actually about that. This was something from like a year ago. I was starting with a new couple. It was our first session. I had sent them the relationship checkup assessment that we do with most of our couples where they do this online assessment. It sends me a report and I evaluate it and go over it with them. And as I was reviewing their report with them, The wife was pretty upset with me. She did not agree with my assessment. She did not feel like she was the cause of the problem.
I remember this. Yeah.
And she really wanted me just to tell her husband that he was the problem, and that be it.
He should shape up.
And I pointed out some things that she needed to work on, and she was livid. She was so mad at me. And I really didn't expect to hear back from her again. And several months later, I did. But what she did, to her credit, that was so brilliant was she called a friend. So even though I made her upset, she decided to call someone who she knew and trusted to tell her the truth. And she said, "Am I really doing these things? Is this really what I do? Is this really something that I'm immature and in an area that I need to really grow up?" And her friend said, "Yep."
You gotta love your friends. Boy, they will help shine a light on those dark corners in your life that you don't want to know about.
Well, you hope so. At least the good friends,
If you
right?
just ask them, right?
Yeah.
If your friend actually says, "Can I be honest with you?" Oh boy, buckle down, buddy.
Yeah, you're going to get some good
Buckle up.
feedback
You're
here.
going to get some great
But that's
feedback.
what's going to help you move into that next
Yeah.
level, that next step.
Yeah. So now I want you to look down at those steps in front of you and take a step upward. So now we're on the second step. This step, if you look down, is called conscious incompetence. And at this stage, you've discovered that you need to learn this new skill, and you are now beginning to see that you have some knowledge gaps, right? And you realize that other people probably have this skill. You're watching them do it, and it's easy for them, and you're struggling with this, pretty much like my golf swing,
Yeah.
but you suck at it. So
Yeah.
you realize that you're conscious of this skill that you're missing, but you're not very competent at it. So you're still incompetent,
Right. So you're conscious,
right?
incompetent. So conscious incompetence.
Yep.
And this is the hardest step to be on. This place feels totally demoralizing. It's like, man, I was on top of my game, and now you tell me that I don't know anything, right? Like, it can cause you to lose confidence in yourself. It can make you feel overwhelmed. It can make you feel frustrated. It can make you feel like giving up. I noticed, back to our son and driving, I noticed when he was, the first week, he was so excited to drive. "Mom, let's go for a drive. Mom, let's go for a drive." Just pestering me nonstop. "Let's go drive. Let's go drive." And then, soon a week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by. I'm like, he hasn't asked me to go driving.
Learning is hard.
Right. So all this time went by, and when it hit me, oh, he hit this stage of realizing there's so much to learn, and he was feeling overwhelmed and he was feeling frustrated.
Yeah. And I bet that many of you who listen to the podcast each week sort of feel this way, right? You hear us introduce new topics, and then you get overwhelmed by how much more you still have to master in your relationship.
Yeah. And I think we want you to really know that you're normal, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you're not alone, and it's okay. And, just keep going. We recognize that that's that place that you're at, and it's a very normal place to be at. And I remember so many times getting frustrated with myself when I was at that place, and still sometimes I do. Yesterday, even.
Yeah.
Right. Still get frustrated with myself for maybe getting triggered or losing my cool or forgetting to use the right words or to use a gentle startup, and just generally feeling like I'm mucking it all up.
Yeah. And this is why it's important, especially in these learning phases, to stay positive, combat those negative thinkings, refocus your energy on what it is you want, your goal. And remember, learning might be uncomfortable in the short term, but these are skills that will help you build and reach your goals to a better relationship and a better life. It's
Yeah.
worth it. So stick with it. Keep learning, keep trying, keep messing up. It's one of the best ways to learn.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Even if you're only moving forward a little bit, you can slide back. Just keep pressing forward.
Yes. Now, of the 4 steps of learning that we're talking about today, the first 2, which we just talked about, the first one was unconscious incompetence,
Right.
and then conscious incompetence.
Yep.
Right. Those 2 are the hardest to identify. And that makes sense, right? Because it's unconscious to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the tipping point when you're moving from step 2 to now step 3, where you realize that this is where the learning takes place. So now again, I want you to look down to the steps. I want you to move on to the third step. This step is called consciously skilled, or conscious competence.
Conscious competence.
Yeah, this level is pretty awesome because now you've acquired the skills and the knowledge you need, and you find yourself regularly practicing the skill, and then you gain more confidence every time you use this skill.
Yeah, and that starts to feel good, right? Now we're starting to have a lot more positive emotion
Yep.
than before when it was so frustrating.
Feeling good because you're nailing it at least once or twice,
Yeah,
right?
it feels much better, but there's still one little thing. It's not yet automatic. You still have to concentrate pretty hard when you do it to get it right. Even though you are feeling more confident and more proud of yourself, it still takes a lot of focus and conscious effort, right? That's why it's called conscious competence, because you have to put in a lot of that conscious effort.
Yeah, and so back to sort of our car analogy, do you remember when you were learning how to drive a car? Do you remember sort of going through this checklist in your head, especially if you needed to change lanes, like
Yeah.
look over your shoulder, check your blind spot, is the blinker on? And sometimes you might have recited those things. Charlotte has a thing that she learned, right? It's like signal, mirror, look over the shoulder, then go. And
Yeah.
um, this is having competence, right? So you know how to do it,
Yeah.
but you're still putting a lot of conscious effort into it.
Exactly. And then eventually we later end up driving to our destination and forgetting how we even got there.
Yeah, don't remember how I even
Right.
got here. Like,
But we're not to that point yet. We're
no,
still like consciously still thinking through those checklists.
yep,
And when it comes to relationship skills, it's the same, right? Once we start to gain some communication skills or learning how to express our needs or whatever it may be, we may still be coaching ourselves on the inside. Like, oh, remember to use a gentle start, or remember to use empathy, or find out what's important to him in the midst of this conflict, right? We might still be running those checklists in our mind, and that's okay.
yeah. And there's a couple of ways to move out of level 3 and then up to level 4. And obviously, the first one is to keep practicing.
Yes.
And also, when you teach other people what you're learning, it helps you understand the material at a higher level. We have a sort of a thing that is prevalent in the medical world, and it's also everyone else. But it's about procedures. It's called see one, do one, teach one, right? So watch somebody do it, then you do it, and then you teach it. Because when you have to teach concept, a skill, anything, you really need to bring yourself to a higher level. You need to understand that thing that you're teaching inside and out and around so that
Mhm.
you can competently teach that skill to others.
Yeah, that's such a great way to move to level 4 is the more we start to share our knowledge with
Yeah.
other people and be able to articulate it, it raises our level of understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And another way to move forward into level 4 is to start to personalize the skills, to personalize the information to you, right? So we give you scripts, we give you, repair statements and repair attempts and gentle startups. We give you like the semantics, but when you can actually take those words and phrases and then craft your own from them, that's when I think you've really learned it. That's when you can really say, I've applied that principle to our situation, my life, my way of speaking, our situation. There was that story recently we were sharing with someone on a podcast, and they said they took when they get flooded, when they're starting to get
Oh yeah,
flooded.
yeah.
What
That
was it?
carrot. It was
Carrot.
yeah, carrots.
Yeah.
So Charlotte and I have a thing that we say if it's coming out too sharp and we want to sort of slow things down, and it's a little bit of a repair attempt. For us it was, we'll say, oh, that's a little sharp. Um, and I think we've taught that before, but this couple said they say carrot, which I think is just amazing. Talk about a pattern interrupt. You
Like
know,
you feel yourself getting flooded. Carrots.
carrots. I'm like, wait,
Right.
what is carrots? And so
Yeah.
now you're trying to figure out this nonsensical term that came into it, and it's a great pattern interrupt.
And it's funny, which humor is
Yeah,
great, but that's an example of applying the knowledge right to themselves
yeah,
and making it
absolutely.
their own.
So we want to look back down one last time to the steps that are in front of you and take that final step. And this last step in the 4 levels of learning is called unconscious competence. This is where your mastery of the skill is effortless, actually unconscious.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about it. You're not reciting a checklist. It actually just comes automatically. And think about the things that used to scare us or freak us out, right? They no longer bother us. And like driving and changing lanes. And just as Charlotte talked about, how many times do we get to our destination? And if I were to ask you when you went to school, like, did you have to stop at the stoplight by the Maverick? Would you remember it?
Yeah, I know. You
Yeah.
just do it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, wow, literally don't remember how I got here.
Yeah.
I just got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think I think another thing about being at this stage, not only is it automatic and second nature, like you just described, I think it's important to point out that we're not always aware of the stages as we're moving through them. I
Yeah.
don't think we sit there and go, oh, I'm in level one, I'm in level two, I'm in level three, right? We don't do that. We just kind of move through them.
It just gets easier to complete the tasks, or easier to avoid disagreements, or easier to show love
Hmm.
and grace than it did
Hmm.
before, because we're continuing to sort
Yeah.
of work on and build those skills. Yeah.
Yeah. And in some cases, it's entirely possible that you could already be really good at something automatically. And you can be so unconsciously competent, right? You could be unconsciously competent in many things. And you could have gotten to that level of competency just from certain experiences that you've had in your life, from certain exposures that you've had in your life. And I thought about this today. For example, if you have been trained as a first responder, you've probably had training in how to manage and regulate your emotions in highly stressful situations. And you've probably been put into those highly stressful situations a lot. And because of that exposure, that may or may not have generalized to your relationship. And so you might find that you're just, in some cases, naturally really good at preventing emotional flooding in your relationship. And you didn't even have to learn that. So we can be good at things just from exposure. We can be at this level four just because we've had certain experiences in our life, which means we all have skills right now that we're probably not even aware that we have
Yeah. Some really good skills, right?
just from our experiences.
And, and that's where there can be some pitfalls, even at this level of competency. When we
Yes.
become so good at a skill, we don't realize we have it. We can then sometimes get impatient or annoyed with other people who may be struggling to learn that skill.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember to give grace, as our partner is learning these skills. And this doesn't even have to apply. I mean, this obviously applies in relationship, but applies in everything you're learning in life. This can apply to your coworkers,
Yeah.
your staff, as they're learning new things. I thought about this also today. Sometimes even at work, there's things that we are just naturally good at. We're competent, we're unconsciously competent at them. We just do them. And sometimes at work, we may just go and do things that we could help other people become more capable of, right? And
Yeah.
we could task them to do it, but we just start taking responsibility for tasks that we don't really need to do just because we can do them.
Yeah. Most likely. Yeah.
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 So, can we go backwards in this ladder?
Yeah, I think your skills can get rusty,
Yeah,
right?
they
If you
can.
don't use them. It's sort of like, I guess, like they always say, you never forget how to ride a bike, but you're really good at riding a bike, and then you're not good at it if you haven't practiced it, right? And, I used to actually be a whole lot better at golf, and then I took 20 something years off of golf, and now I'm having to learn those
Mm,
skills. Now it's coming back a little bit faster because I did have some of that skill before, but
yeah.
you have to use your skill if you want to stay at this level.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly.
Now, here's one interesting fact before we start to wrap up this episode. Research shows that any behavior change, right? So, if we're trying to change a behavior, we're working on these new skills in our relationship, it requires both emotional effort and cognitive effort.
Okay.
So, when we're in the process of learning a new skill, it really is only going to stick if we're willing to put forth the emotional effort as well. And so, this is why it is so important to understand that each of these levels of learning comes with emotional struggles, right? Whatever you're feeling, trust, like it's important to give yourself grace and feel whatever comes up for you, whether you're feeling frustrated, confused, irritated with other people, right? You're going to go through all of these emotions, and it's important that we're not unnecessarily hard on ourselves. It's expected that you're going to feel frustrated when you're learning. That's normal.
Yeah. I mean, what I started with, like I said, oh man, learning sucks, because we all suck when we first learn
Yes, we
something,
do.
and you just got to kind of dig in. But you remember our motto, right? Relationships are people growing machines.
Yes, they are.
They provide us with a stimulus to learn new skills. They provide us with a mirror as our partners reflect some of the negative things we don't like, right? And
Mhm.
if we'll take that reflection and realize that, hey, here's an area where I'm underdeveloped and I need to grow. I need to skill up a little bit.
Skill up. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, this is going to take, because it does take that emotional work as
Yeah.
well, right? It's
Yeah.
going to
There's an
take
emotional investment there.
there is. And that means we need to give ourselves love and compassion. And we also need to have love and compassion for our spouse as we're working through these levels of learning. But this is the work. This is life work. I think sometimes, hey, if I'm level 4 on all these relationship skills by the time I die, then I'll be happy. But I don't think I'm there with all of them myself some days. It's life work. And relationships are the true refiner's fire. We've talked about this over and over. It's the metaphor Robert and I love to use. The refiner, takes metal, melts it down. The impurities rise up to the surface so that that's the dross that gets pulled off. And then that metal can be reshaped into something more beautiful, right? And so that's what relationships do. They reshape us into something better than we were.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's pretty awesome. And I'm curious what you took away from this episode. So come on over and share it with us this week on social media, or better yet, share what you learned by leaving a comment along with a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on.
And more importantly, as always, if there's someone in your life that needs help in their relationship and you think they might benefit from this episode, would you kindly share it with them? Or maybe now that you've listened to this episode, maybe you take the opportunity to even teach them several things that you learned in this episode. Because what's that going to do? It's going to help you to increase in your 4 levels of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, be kind to each other this week. Take care of each other. Remember, it's the small things done often that make the biggest impact.
Until next time.